control room floated quietly above the Earth, suspended at the top of the world's greatest machine, the Stellar Bridge. This structure, a silver thread connecting Earth's surface to the stars, had taken almost a century to build. Now it stood ready, and so did Captain Elias Hart. Elias walked slowly across the glass floor of the control room. Under his boots, the curve of the Earth stretched out in a bright blue arc. Clouds drifted like soft brushstrokes, and thin bands of gold sunlight touched the oceans below. It was a view most people would never see with their own eyes. It was beautiful, but it also reminded him how small everything could feel from up here. The mission was clear. At 7 o'clock exactly, they would activate the Stellar Bridge for the first time. A pulse of energy would travel through the structure, up into orbit and out into deep space. Humanity's signal would echo across the stars, but what made Elias uneasy wasn't the mission itself, it was the unknown. No one knew what might answer. All around the control room, people moved quickly and quietly. Engineers checked their data screens. Communications officers spoke softly into headsets. A low, constant hum filled the room, the heartbeat of the machine that waited for a single command. Dr. Myra Vance stood at the center console. She wasn't in uniform like Elias. She wore a white lab coat and a simple silver pin shaped like a star. She had been part of this project since its first foundation was poured into the ground. For her, this was not just a mission, it was a dream becoming real. When Elias stepped closer, she looked up at him. Her eyes were steady, sharp, and full of something rare in moments like this. "Calm courage, Captain." She said, "Everything is ready." Elias nodded slowly. "I know." She tilted her head. "But you're still thinking." He let out a small breath. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. We're about to tell the entire universe that we're here, that we exist." Mira smiled softly. "We've always existed. Now we're just saying hello." The words were simple, but they held power. Mira believed in this mission completely. She believed that humanity was ready to reach out, to connect, to discover something greater than itself. She believed that whoever or whatever was out there would listen. The massive clock on the front wall displayed the time in red: 0 hours, 5 minutes, and 0 seconds. 5 minutes until activation. The entire world was watching. Billions of people on Earth followed the live broadcast. Schoolchildren held their breath. Scientists waited at their stations. Some people prayed. Others simply stared at their screens, silent. Elias glanced down at the Earth again. He thought about how far humanity had come. Just 2 centuries ago, people were sending their first small machines into space. Now they were opening a door to the stars, and that door was in his hands. "Captain Hart," came a voice through the speaker. It was Mission Control down on Earth. "Final system checks are complete. All protocols are green. Stellar Bridge is stable." "Copy," Elias replied. "Captain," Mira said, turning toward him fully now. "Do you remember the first time you came up here?" He had been a young pilot then, chosen to test the first elevator car that climbed the bridge. The journey had been quiet and long, but unforgettable. He had looked out of the small window as the sky slowly turned black and the stars appeared like tiny white fires. It was the first time he realized that the universe was not a wall, it was a sea. And humanity had only just learned to build boats. "You told me something," Mira said, her voice soft. "One step can change everything, remember?" Elias nodded. "I remember." She took a step closer, close enough that he could see the reflection of the stars in her dark eyes. She didn't need to shout. She just said it quietly, clearly, and firmly. "Do it now." It wasn't an order. It was a promise. Elias turned toward the console. His hand hovered above the glowing button. Once he pressed it, the world would change forever. The bridge would light up. The signal would launch. And Earth's message would travel farther than anything humans had ever sent before. He thought about his father, a history teacher who loved to talk about the age of discovery. "The bravest moment," his father once said, "is not when you arrive. It's when you leave." Elias smiled faintly. Maybe this was humanity's bravest moment. Outside, the bridge stretched into the sky like a silver river frozen in place. From the ground, people in cities and villages could see its faint glow reaching the clouds. Drones hovered silently to record every angle. Around the world, people gathered in parks, on rooftops, and at coastlines to watch history unfold in the control room. The engineers called out their final checks: power grid, green, structural integrity, stable, signal matrix, aligned, external, atmosphere, clear. Hum in the room grew louder as the systems synced together. The lights dimmed slightly. It felt like the whole structure was taking a deep breath. Myra stood beside Elias now. "This is what we've been working for. This is why we built it." "I know," he said. She smiled. "Then don't think too long." The seconds ticked down. 0 hours, 1 minute, and 0 seconds. On the main screen, Earth's position was shown in the middle, surrounded by the darkness of space. A small point of light marked the bridge's endpoint, a station floating just beyond orbit. The first transmission would leave from there, amplified 1,000 times, spread across the galaxy like a ripple in a pond. Ilias's finger hovered above the button. He could hear the faint rhythm of his own heartbeat. He thought of all the people watching: children in classrooms, scientists in remote labs, farmers, teachers, artists, dreamers, people who would remember this moment for the rest of their lives. He pressed the button. The bridge came alive. A deep, clear tone filled the air. Not a harsh alarm, but something almost like a note from a musical instrument. Lights flowed up the bridge like streams of gold water. The structure shimmered. From space, it looked as if a new star had risen from the surface of Earth. Data raced across the screens. Every measurement showed perfect stability. The transmission core activated. A pulse of energy built at the top of the bridge, waiting to leap into the dark. "Signal is charging," someone reported. 50%. 60. 70. Mira closed her eyes for a second. She wasn't afraid. She was listening. The bridge's hum reminded her of wind moving through trees. Soft, natural, almost alive. Elias didn't move. He watched the energy climb toward 100%. Meanwhile, across Earth, a hush fell over billions of people. In crowded cities, the usual noise stopped. In rural towns, people stood outside looking up. Even in places where the bridge was just a thin silver line in the sky, people could feel something in the air, a kind of quiet electricity. A promise that something new was beginning. The countdown reached 0. A brilliant column of light shot upward from the bridge, piercing the blackness of space. It wasn't a beam like a weapon. It was clear, gentle, and bright, like a sunrise in the middle of the night. It carried a message coded in thousands of languages, sounds, and patterns. A message that simply said, "We are here. We want to meet you." The bridge didn't shake or tremble. It simply sang. Mira opened her eyes. "It's beautiful." Elias nodded slowly. "It is the message traveled faster than anything humanity had ever built." Beyond the orbiting station, it expanded into a soft wave. Deep space, silent for so long, now carried Earth's voice. Somewhere, in places no human had ever seen, that signal would arrive. Back in the control room, applause broke out. Engineers hugged each other. Some cried. Some laughed. Even those who had spent years buried in wires and numbers felt the weight of what they'd done. Humanity wasn't alone anymore, not in spirit. But Elias didn't cheer right away. He stared at the main screen, where the wave of light expanded outward, like a heartbeat, Mira noticed. "You're thinking again," he chuckled softly. "Old habit." "What now?" she asked. He looked at her, then back at the stars. "Now we wait, and we listen." She placed a hand on his arm. "And when they answer," he smiled, "then we take the next step." Outside, the bridge continued to shine, a steady golden thread reaching into the endless dark. Around the world, people began to celebrate. News reporters spoke in excited voices. Musicians wrote songs. Poets found words that felt too small for a moment so big. Elias stood quietly at the window, watching Earth spin slowly below him. Mira joined him, shoulder to shoulder. You know, she said, some people will say this was reckless. Maybe, Elias said. But every great story starts with a risk. Do you think they'll hear us? Yes, he answered. I think someone's been waiting too. The control room grew quieter again as the celebrations moved outside. The hum of the bridge became softer, steadier. For the first time, Elias felt a strange calm. It wasn't relief. It was something deeper. A sense that humanity had finally looked beyond itself. He turned to Mira. Today, this was more than a mission. She nodded. It was a hello, he smiled. Yeah, a hello. Outside, beyond the last reach of human eyes, the signal raced on. Through nebulae, through empty black, through light years of silence. Somewhere far away, something or someone might hear it. And maybe, just maybe, they would whisper back. Elias didn't know what the future would bring, but he knew one thing with certainty. When Mira had looked into his eyes and said, "Do it now," she had been right, because sometimes one step really does change everything. The bridge had been shining for 3 days around the earth. People had grown used to the soft golden light that flowed into the night sky. It was like a second sun, calm, steady, and full of promise. The entire planet seemed to be breathing a little differently now. News programs called it the long hello. Poets wrote about it. Children pointed to the sky and whispered to each other, wondering who might be listening. Up in the orbital control room, Captain Elias Hart stared at the main display screen. Every second, data streamed in from deep space. So far, there had been no answer. He told himself he wasn't disappointed, but the truth was, he felt the weight of silence pressing down. He had sent the message. Billions had watched, but what if no one answered? What if the universe was just empty? Mira Vance walked into the control room carrying 2 cups of hot tea. The crew had stopped calling her doctor and now just called her
Elmira.
She handed one of the cups to Elias. You haven't moved much, she said gently. He gave a small smile. Someone has to keep staring at the stars. She walked up beside him. You're expecting an answer. I'm hoping for one. She leaned her elbows on the railing. Do you remember when the first message was sent into space more than 100 years ago? Back then, they didn't get an answer either. But they kept hoping, and now. The message is louder than it's ever been. Elias took a slow sip of tea. It was warm, a small comfort in the endless cold of space. But sometimes, hope feels heavier than silence. Myra didn't reply right away. She just stood beside him, watching the data scroll down the screen in neat white lines. Below them, Earth rotated slowly. The clouds shifted like soft blankets over the continents. From this height, everything looked calm. But down there, things were changing fast. People were asking questions no one had asked before. What would happen if something or someone answered? Across the planet, scientists worked day and night to listen for any sign of a reply. Massive radio telescopes turned toward the stars. Data centers lit up with streams of information. Students joined researchers in decoding the smallest signals. Humanity, for the first time, was united by a single act, listening, and then, at exactly 7:43 on the 4th day, something happened. It was faint at first. A small change in the background noise, an unusual frequency pattern, too regular to be random, too soft to be natural. A technician in one of the listening centers on Earth leaned closer to her monitor, not sure if she was imagining it. Then the signal grew stronger. Captain Hart. A young officer ran into the control room, slightly out of breath. We've got something. Elias stood up straight. Where? Deep Space Array in the southern hemisphere picked up a harmonic pulse. It matches the bridge's return channel. Myra's eyes widened. They answered. The words felt like wind rushing through the room. Everyone paused. The quiet hum of machines seemed louder now. For a moment, nobody moved. They just let the idea settle in. Elias turned toward the communication deck. Patch it through. The main screen changed. A long, thin waveform appeared, shimmering like a silver ribbon. It pulsed softly, rising and falling with precise rhythm. It wasn't human. That much was clear. The room filled with a sound-soft, melodic, almost like a choir humming in the distance. No words, no language they knew, but it carried a strange, warm feeling, like a door opening. Mira whispered. "It's music," Elias stared. "Or something close." The harmonic pattern continued for several minutes, repeating with slight variations each time. Data teams started analyzing every curve, every pulse. Scientists on Earth joined in real time, comparing notes, building models, trying to find meaning inside the melody. But even without translation, everyone could feel it. This wasn't random. Someone was saying, "We hear you." Ours turned into a long, quiet day. The message repeated itself over and over, like waves gently hitting a shore. Teams around the world worked together to decode its structure. The pattern wasn't built on human language. It was built on mathematics, ratios, and simple musical intervals. A universal foundation. "It's clever," Mira said, standing behind a group of linguists at the terminal. "They're starting with something anyone can understand." "Not words," Elias said softly. "A bridge." She smiled at the choice of his word. A bridge. Just like the one they had built. On Earth, people gathered in streets, parks, and open fields to listen. News channels broadcasted the sound, calling it the answer song. It didn't sound threatening. It didn't sound like a warning. It was gentle, rhythmic, like someone knocking on a door politely, waiting for it to open, for the first time in history. Humanity knew with certainty they were not alone, but Elias also knew something else. This was only the beginning. That night, most of the staff had rotated out to rest. Elias and Mira remained, sitting side by side, watching the signal as it repeated in the background. "Do you ever wonder who they are?" Elias asked. "All the time," Mira replied. "I imagine them looking at their sky, just like we did, wondering if anyone is out there." He leaned back in his chair. "Do you think they're like us?" She shook her head slightly. "I don't know. But maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is that they answered." The stars beyond the window glittered like scattered diamonds. It felt different, now not empty, but full of quiet life. 2 days later, the signal changed. Mira was the first to notice it. She was reviewing a sequence of patterns when something shifted. A new tone entered the melody, a different frequency, clear and deliberate. "Elias," she called softly. He walked over. "What is it?" "Listen." They turned up the volume. The new tone repeated every 30 seconds, weaving through the original melody. At first it sounded random, but then Mira's fingers flew across the console. She translated the rhythm into numerical form. "It's a sequence," she whispered. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Elias recognized it too. The Fibonacci sequence. A quiet smile spread across her face. "They know math. They're talking to us." Over the next few hours, Earth answered. Using the bridge's harmonic channel, humanity sent a reply, a sequence of their own. Not words, not language, just patterns, numbers, and sound. The universe answered again. The rhythm grew richer. Notes overlapped like gentle echoes. It was a conversation without language, one built entirely on logic and beauty. Humanity was not just receiving a message anymore. They were speaking back. Down on Earth, something remarkable happened. People who normally disagreed on everything, politics, faith, science, culture, began to listen together. The sound of the signal echoed in homes, schools, and streets. Children tapped the rhythm on their desks. Scientists sang it quietly under their breath. Musicians began composing around it. It became a song that belonged to everyone. One evening, as the signal played softly through the control room speakers, Elias found himself at the observation window again. He placed his hand on the glass, looking at the bridge's soft golden glow reaching into space. Mira joined him a moment later. "You look serious, I'm thinking. Again?" He chuckled quietly. "Always." She stood beside him, both of them watching the endless night beyond the stars. "What is it this time?" He hesitated for a moment. What if this is more than just a conversation? What if it's an invitation? Mira tilted her head slightly. "Then we'll answer?" The next morning, the signal changed again. This time it wasn't just tones or numbers. The frequencies split into layers. Images began to form not sharp photographs, but soft patterns of light and shape. A spiral, a star cluster, a curved line that looked like an arch. Mira stared at the screen. They're showing us something. Elias leaned closer. Coordinates? The data team worked quickly, mapping the patterns onto a star chart. When the final shape appeared, everyone in the room went silent. It was a map, a location in deep space. Not too far from a bright star humanity had already studied, a place reachable with their most advanced ships. The aliens, or whoever they were, had sent directions. Across the world, governments and scientists held emergency meetings. Questions filled the air. Should humanity go? Should they stay? Was it safe? Was it wise? But outside of those rooms, ordinary people felt something different. Wonder. For generations, humans had looked up and asked, "Are we alone?" Now they had a map in their hands, a map drawn. By another mind, Elias and Mira were called to a private conference with mission leaders. The air in the room was thick with tension, but it wasn't fear. It was the kind of tension that comes when standing on the edge of something extraordinary. A senior official spoke first. "Captain Hart, Dr. Vance, you were at the beginning of this. We want your perspective." Elias exchanged a glance with Mira. Then he spoke. "We built the bridge because we believed someone might be listening," he said slowly. "Now someone is, and they're showing us where to find them." Mira added softly, "They didn't come to us with war or threats. They came with a song." The room fell quiet. Later, alone in the control room, Myra watched the map rotate slowly on the screen. She could feel her heart beating a little faster. The unknown didn't frighten her, not now. It felt like standing on the edge of a vast ocean, waiting for the tide to rise. Elias entered quietly behind her. "You're already imagining what's out there." "Of course," she said with a small laugh. "Aren't you?" "Yeah," he admitted. "Every second." She turned toward him. "We can't ignore it, I know." Her eyes locked on his, just like that first day when she had said, "Do it now." This time she didn't have to say. For weeks the signal never stopped. The soft, rhythmic melody from deep space became a part of everyday life on Earth. Children hummed it on their way to school. Scientists used it to make new discoveries in sound and mathematics. Musicians built entire symphonies around it. The world was changing, quietly but completely. The coordinates in the message were confirmed again and again. They pointed to a star system about 15 light-years away, K, a place reachable by the newest generation of long-distance ships. It was close enough to touch, yet far enough to remind everyone how small they still were in the universe. Inside the orbital control room, Captain Elias Hart stood at the same window where he had pressed the button weeks earlier. Below him, Earth rotated slowly in a blue arc. Above him, the bridge stretched into the darkness like a golden thread. This was the same place where it had all begun. Now, was about to become the place where humanity would take its greatest step. Mira Vance entered quietly, as she always did. She stood beside him, hands tucked into the pockets of her simple white coat. Her hair floated slightly in the low gravity. She didn't need to say anything at first. She just looked out into the stars. "It feels different now," Elias said softly. "What does?" Mira asked. "The sky, the silence." He paused. "It doesn't feel empty anymore." She smiled gently. "Because it isn't." Around the world, a decision had been made. Humanity would answer the invitation. Not with weapons. Not with fear. But with curiosity and courage. For the first time, humans would travel not just to explore, but to meet. The ship was ready. It was called Aurora, named after the light that appears before dawn. It was designed to travel farther than any vessel before it. It carried no soldiers, no war engines, only explorers, scientists, engineers, and storytellers. The ship's heart was not made of fire and iron, but of hope. Elias had been chosen to lead the mission. Not because he was the bravest or the most skilled pilot, but because he had been the one to take the first step. Mira would be by his side leading the communication and science teams. Together, they had started this story. Now they would see where it led. On launch day, billions of people across the planet gathered around screens. In small towns, in huge cities, on quiet farms, and busy ports, people stood together and watched the sky. Some held hands. Some cried. Some whispered prayers. But none of them felt alone. Inside the bridge terminal, the Aurora gleamed like polished silver. Lights ran along its smooth surface. It didn't look like a weapon or a fortress. It looked like a promise. Elias walked down the final corridor toward the docking gate. Mira walked beside him, a small bag slung over her shoulder. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Words felt too small for a moment like this. Finally, Mira broke the silence. "Do you ever think about what happens if they're nothing like us?" Elias thought for a second. "Every day? Does it scare you?" He shook his head slowly. "No, it excites me." She gave a small laugh. "I should have guessed." They reached the gate. The doors slid open with a soft hiss. A group of engineers and mission controllers stood waiting. They saluted him, not as a soldier, but as a symbol. One by one, they shook his hand. "Bring back stories," one of them said quietly. Elias smiled. "I promise." On board the Aurora, everything hummed softly with power. The ship's interior was clean, bright, and open. Walls curved gently, giving the sense of a living structure, not a machine. Each crew member moved with calm precision, their voices low but steady. They knew they were stepping into something history would never forget. Mira took her place in the central communication room, surrounded by glowing screens. Elias moved to the captain's chair, which sat in the middle of a transparent dome. Through it, he could see the bridge stretching up into the stars. "All systems green," said the flight officer. "Navigation ready," said another. Mira's voice came through the internal channel. "Signal beacon is stable. We're locked on their coordinates." Elias took a deep breath. He remembered that first day, the weight of the silence, the moment Myra had looked into his eyes and said, "Do it now." That moment had brought them here. He spoke clearly. "Begin launch sequence." The Aurora slid forward like a bird taking its first glide. Outside, the bridge lit up in flowing gold, guiding the ship upward. From Earth, people saw a bright line of light rising through the night sky. It looked like a star being born. The hum grew louder as the ship passed beyond the atmosphere. The world below became smaller and smaller, until it was just a glowing blue marble. "Separation complete," said the flight officer. "Engage pulse drive," Elias commanded. The ship shuddered softly, then everything went silent. A brilliant flash spread outward, but it wasn't an explosion. It was a ripple, like a drop of water falling into stillness. The Aurora disappeared into the deep. The journey to the star system took less time than anyone had imagined. Thanks to the pulse drive technology built on the same principles as the bridge, the ship moved through folded space, almost as if the stars themselves bent closer to welcome it. Inside the ship, days passed quietly. Mira spent hours studying the incoming signal, which grew stronger the closer they got. The melody had changed slightly. New tones danced with the old, as if the unknown beings had noticed the ship moving toward them. "It's like they're excited too," Mira said one evening, smiling at the screen. Elias watched the rhythm. "Maybe they've been waiting as long as we have." Crew members wrote journals, painted, sang, and recorded their thoughts. None of them wanted the journey to be just a scientific mission. They wanted it to be human. In one corner of the ship, a musician played the alien melody on a simple wooden flute, and the sound filled the corridors with quiet beauty. Mira walked through the halls often, talking to the crew, listening to their stories. She saw hope in their eyes. Hope was fragile, but here it felt strong. On the 7th day of the journey, they arrived. The star system shone softly, wrapped in bands of gold and violet light. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The main star was surrounded by rings of glowing dust that shimmered like silk in sunlight. In the middle of those rings, a single structure floated, a shape unlike any human design. Elias leaned forward in the captain's chair. There it is. The alien structure was vast but graceful, built of smooth curves and glowing veins of light. It looked almost like it had grown naturally, like a living thing. No weapons, no walls. Just beauty, Mira whispered. They built a bridge too, as the ship slowed down. The alien melody filled the communication room, louder and clearer now. Patterns of light flowed from the structure toward them, as if inviting them closer. "Captain," said the navigator. "They're guiding us in." Elias gave a calm nod. "Follow their lead." The Aurora moved along a path of light that opened like a golden river. As they approached, the alien structure began to sing not with a single tone, but with many, layering like a choir. It was breathtaking. For a moment, the entire crew fell silent. No one breathed too loudly. They were hearing another civilization say, "Welcome." The ship reached the outer shell of the structure. It didn't feel like docking. It felt like entering a glowing garden. Inside, soft light wrapped around them. Their instruments showed no threats, no danger. Just warmth, Captain Myra said softly. "Look." In front of the dome, a shape appeared. It wasn't sharp or frightening. It was soft, fluid, shifting colors gently like water. It didn't walk, it floated. The being was unlike anything human eyes had ever seen, but something about its presence felt familiar, peaceful. Elias felt his heartbeat quicken, not from fear, but awe. "They're here," he whispered. The being raised what looked like a hand or something like it. A ripple of light passed through the structure. A new tone joined the song. Mira placed her hand on the console. "They're talking," she answered with the melody humanity had sent weeks earlier. Her voice was steady, clear. The two songs intertwined like old friends meeting for the first time. The alien being pulsed softly with light. The ship's translators picked up the mathematical patterns. Hidden inside the music, numbers, coordinates, simple ideas. "They're sharing," Mira said, tears shining in her eyes. "They want us to know them." Elias stood slowly. He looked at the glowing path leading to the airlock. It wasn't fear that filled him. It was the same feeling he had back in the control room when he pressed that button. The quiet certainty that some steps shape everything that comes after. Mira turned to him, understanding without words. She didn't need to say, "Do it now," this time. He already knew. He stepped toward the airlock. The door opened with a soft hiss. Warm light flooded in, wrapping around him like a soft wind. For a moment, he didn't feel like he was walking into the unknown. He felt like he was walking home to a place he had never been. The first meeting between species wasn't made of grand speeches. No flags, no threats. Only a shared song. Elias reached out his hand. The being responded by extending its glowing shape. They didn't shake hands. They didn't need to. The contact happened in silence, a pulse of light between two forms. The melody rose, brighter, fuller. Mira watched from behind, a smile spreading slowly across her face. "We did it," she whispered. Back on Earth, the entire planet watched through live transmission. Billions of people held their breath as humanity met another world for the first time. There was no fear in their faces. Only wonder. Hours passed like minutes. The being led Elias and Myra through.